Thanks for joining our conversation. We're asking the question, who is Jesus?
And we've got to start with the most obvious question that absolutely everybody starts with. Was Jesus white?
I don't think everybody starts with that question. Is Jesus white? Do they?
I mean, fair enough. They don't. But I think that if you did start with that question, you might find out some pretty interesting stuff. I mean, let's start with you, Keith. What did you think of as Jesus when you were a little kid?
When I was a kid, I grew up reading these little picture books, and Jesus was in those, and he always looked the same in almost every book. He had like long, flowy, blondish brown hair. He had a little halo over his head, pale skin, blue eyes, floated above the ground, angelic kind of a accompaniment. And I'll be honest, he wasn't very manly.
So you heard it here first. Keith needs a manly Jesus.
Well, the funny thing about it is now I'm not very manly either, but you know, it is what it is.
So,
when I was a boy, I thought I was manly.
Be honest for everybody. Do you shave your legs?
No, I don't shave my legs. Stop.
We can't show this on camera, but I mean, if you looked at Keith's legs, you might think that he's got a little habit.
I'm so disappointed in Patrick. All right, Patrick, what did you think of when you were a kid about Jesus?
I mean, okay, so I didn't grow up in a Christian family. I don't even remember the first picture I saw of Jesus, but I'm pretty sure it was, well, you told me, what's that guy's name?
Warner Sallman. Warner Sallman had this photo he did of Jesus, and not really a photo, right? He painted this picture of him, and it's the most reproduced image of Jesus in the history of the world. And it's shaped what a lot of people think of Jesus looked like.
I mean, so I looked it up after you told me about it, and that's definitely what I
That's
thought,
what you thought of.
as what Jesus looked like. But there's some really funny versions out there. So apparently there's this, I think she was 9 or 10-year-old girl, and she died and went to heaven.
What's died? You don't believe a 9 or 10-year-old girl?
Well, no. I mean, like,
You're making fun of the girl?
I'm not making fun of her. I'm just saying, like, I don't think she actually died and went to heaven and saw Jesus.
Yeah, I don't either.
The adults in her life should probably say, hey, maybe you had a dream. But anyways, she says she saw Jesus. And now the kid's like a savant because she can paint this amazing paint. I mean, I could never paint this if I spent 30 years trying to learn how to paint. Yeah. But it's like this feathered hair, white Jesus with hazel green eyes.
Hot like Jesus?
He's kind of got, his chin is definitely more square than my chin is.
Kind of stylish Jesus.
Yeah, well, he's just kind of like an 80s Jesus. But so you got that, and then you got the Megyn Kelly thing. You know, she's on Fox News, and she says that as a matter of fact, Jesus is white. You know, he's a historical figure, and that's verifiable.
Well, the funny thing about it is that she said that Jesus is a historical figure, just like Santa Claus, and they are both verifiably white, which I don't know. Jesus, Santa Claus, probably not the same.
Yeah, I mean, what is a verifiably historical figure? I mean, I guess there was St. Nicholas, who I suppose was actually white, but I don't think that's the point with Santa Claus. Those are two different things, right?
So when did you realize that Jesus wasn't white?
Well, I mean, maybe some people are watching this and they're like, wait a second, Jesus isn't white.
Yeah.
And I don't want to sound like I'm better than that person because for the longest time, I definitely...
Do you pray to white Jesus?
No, I pray to... Jesus looks a lot like me in my prayers, right? Is that what we all kind of do? No, I saw this picture and the BBC, they did this study where they're looking at skulls from the 1st century and genetic evidence, and then they used a computer to make an image of Jesus. And when I saw this, it was kind of convicting because it kind of shook me. I was like, whoa, that's not what Jesus looks like. That's not right. But then I thought, I was like, no, that probably is right. I'm the one who's got a problem.
Yeah, I believed in white Jesus for way too long.
Until like 2 years ago?
Kind of embarrassingly long time. I just pictured Jesus looking like me. But now, like you said, they've got ways to reconstruct what Jesus probably looked like, and one of those uses AI. And it's based on the information they have of Mideastern Palestinian men at that time. And so we have a much better idea of what Jesus looked like than we have in the past. But more than anything, I think people like me, maybe like you, are just waking up to the fact that we've made Jesus into our own image. And that's not the real Jesus. So if we want to ask the question, who is Jesus? Maybe one place we need to start is that Jesus doesn't look like us. Jesus wasn't white. He didn't grow up in America. He's not an American citizen. Jesus is different than us. We've got a lot to learn.
You just blew the minds of a lot of people out there.
Blew my mind.
Jesus isn't an American. He was a Palestinian Jew.
He can't vote.
He couldn't vote here. Yeah, so
couldn't be president.
I agree with you. And this is why starting with the question, who is Jesus, and then was Jesus white, is really helpful because people believe hey, Jesus is a real person. In fact, we say, hey, I want to have a personal relationship with him. Well, if you want to have a personal relationship with someone, you kind of got to get to know them on their own terms, who they really were in real life. And that's what we're going to talk about.
So what we all do is have a tendency to make Jesus in our own image, to think of Jesus looking like us. And I think that's true probably of everyone.
Don't you wish your wife would think that Jesus was a lot like you?
Well, don't tell her. She actually thinks he wasn't. She's not allowed to take this class.
She knows better now, finally.
Probably so.
That's good.
But there's a guy named Albrecht Dürer who was a famous painter in the 16th century. And he took a picture of himself and Jesus and merged them together. He painted a blend of him and Jesus. And I think in some sense, we've all done that in our life. We've all made Jesus into our own image so that not only Jesus looks kind of like us, but he likes the same things we like. He votes the same way we vote.
You got Republican Jesus, you got Democrat Jesus.
Therapy Jesus, touchdown Jesus.
Oh, I did see this great image of Jesus. It's like this little kid, he's doing a handoff to Jesus, and Jesus is going to run it in for a touchdown. I don't believe in touchdown Jesus because I've never scored a touchdown in my life.
I bet you haven't. Football for Dummies is one of Patrick's kind of books he learned how to become a man by reading Football for Dummies so he can hang out with the guys.
You're saying you have to like football to be a man.
Well,
okay. Let's move on here. We do all have a tendency, though, to make Jesus into our own image, to want him to think the way we do about things. And you know this because when you talk to people, you get into an argument, they say, well, I think that Jesus would do X, or I think that Jesus would love X, or I think that God thinks this about it. And it's like, well, hold on. You're just looking in a mirror. You're just telling me what you think and assuming that Jesus thinks the same thing.
There was a guy in town, a black pastor that I really like, I'm friends with, and he wrote a column about how his theology is a little different than our churches. And he was really complimentary in a lot of ways in the column. But one of the things that he said is that I specifically, but I think he meant we as a church, believe in a white, European, Anglo-American Jesus. And when I ate lunch with him just to talk through it, I was like, thanks for saying all those nice things, but I don't believe that's true for 1 second. I believe in the Jesus from the Orthodox Church of Athanasius and Tertullian and Augustine, who are African and who contributed significantly to our view of who Jesus is and what he taught and everything. So my view of Jesus comes from the African church, not from some white European church.
Yeah, and I think that's something that people need to know, that the early church was not largely white. I haven't even shown you this yet. There's basically they found these mummies in Egypt, and they're from the time of Jesus, and they had this habit of painting them. If you're really rich, you have someone paint you, and then they would wrap your painting up into your mummification deal.
Sounds weird.
Yeah, well, so anyway, so they weird people come along, they unwrap these mummies, they pull out the pictures, and now we've got all these pictures of people from the first century in Alexandria and Syria, in the regions where we know the church was really growing. And if you look at them, you're going to say, wow, these people were not white. It's not just that Jesus wasn't white. The early church, its earliest, best theologians, like you just mentioned, it doesn't come out of white Europe. It doesn't even reach white Europe until the 400s or 500s, after the era of Constantine. And this is really good for us to know because it tells us that, hey, when I, as a white person, or anybody in our culture comes to Jesus, we're coming to someone who came from a different world, someone who spoke a different language, someone who thought different kinds of thoughts than we think.
So I think that's one of the things that bothered me the most is when people say that Jesus is a Western religious figure. That's not where Jesus came from, and it's not where the church is growing today. If you look at the places where the church is growing the most today, it's Africa, it's Latin America, it's Asia. So this whole idea that Jesus is a construct of white Western men is just historically false.
Yeah, it's not just historically false. It's also something I think we need to allow shape our ideas. As the church is spreading in other areas throughout the world. I mean, there's obviously a period in time where the church was largely located in Europe, but it's never only been located in Europe. And there's always been conversation between East and West and all these different people, and we need to account for that. But I think going back to the big picture of Jesus, it's just saying, hey, Jesus wasn't white, and we need to meet him on his own terms, in his own way.
Isn't it interesting, though, that there's historical evidence that people have always been tempted to make Jesus in their own image? You were telling me that there's kind of an Asian Jesus.
Oh yeah, I mean, I think there's a long history of this. You can go back and find, so some of the earliest churches were the Ethiopic church, the Coptic church, the Syrian church, and you can go and find very, very old icons of Jesus, and lo and behold, everybody makes Jesus look like them.
So we're not the only ones who do that.
No. Like I said, you've got Ethiopic Jesus, you've got Syriac Jesus, you've got all different kinds of Jesuses. And I mean, I don't think it's actually that much of a problem on the one hand, because Jesus was incarnate. He came to be like us. He understands who we are. He loves us. He can understand our culture. He works to get to know us. So there's a real sense in which there's something beautiful about presenting Jesus in your own skin, and it's something that the church has always done.
So there's some sense in which it's good that we think of Jesus as being a part of our life and a part of our world.
Yeah.
It becomes dangerous, though, when we idealize that Jesus and we say that our vision of Jesus is transcendent, it is right and correct. Because there's a lot of damage done in history over white Jesus, right?
Yeah.
That people were subjugated and told they were lesser than because they weren't white like Jesus was.
Yeah, and I think that's the problem with white Jesus. Not that imagining Jesus is like you. That's not the problem. The problem is that white Jesus has become so prevalent. It's all over the world. You can go to Asia and find white Jesus. You can go to Africa and find white Jesus. You can find white Jesus just about anywhere.
Missionaries, right?
Oh yeah, it's all over the place. And it can present the idea that the idealized human is white. And that's not true. Jesus wasn't white, and the ideal human isn't white. Jesus' kingdom is made up of a diversity of people. And you just made an interesting point, which is that this has been used to subjugate people. Now, a lot of times people are like, hey, where did white Jesus come from? And it came largely from German scholarship. And these German scholars...
Oh, stop. Everyone, we are getting ready to be treated to a private school Patrick moment. Private school Patrick is now on.
First of all, I did not go to private school. I most certainly did not go to private school. Went to public school, Oak Park High School, Kansas City, Missouri.
Please.
Anyway, so private school moment. I think this is interesting. Jesus, where was he from, Keith? You don't have to go to private school to know that. Come on.
The Middle East? Palestine?
Where did he grow up, though?
This is a private school Patrick
You
moment.
grew up in Galilee, right?
I'm not even here.
Okay, listen.
Talk to the
just
people.
Listen. You gotta listen.
Lay down some of your private school wisdom.
Okay,
Galilee. Don't speak in Latin.
Right,
Try to keep it in English.
Galilee, right? Now, what does that sound like? It sounds like the word Gaelic, right? And we know that Gaelic people were white people. And so there was this idea that came out of German scholarship that Gaelic people who moved to the region of Galatia also populated Galilee, and that's how we know that Jesus' parents were in fact white.
That's so dumb it makes my head hurt.
Yeah, it is one of the
Just
dumbest
because they
things.
sounded the same?
And of course the tragedy, and we talked about this the other day, is that this idea is then used to bring about the Holocaust. Jews are the ones who killed Jesus. Jesus was white. Jews are the problem. And that shows that when we start making a picture of Jesus that's either in our own image or in our culture's image or in our own skin color, and we say that's the ideal way, that's the right way, it doesn't just do a little harm. It can do massive, massive, massive harm. We have to cast that stuff aside. And again, we have to meet Jesus for who he really was. You done with your trumpet now?
It was fun. So here's where we are. Meeting the real Jesus is probably the most important thing any of us can do. But that's a cross-cultural experience for everyone. Mm-hmm. And so if we're going to understand who Jesus is and what he wants in our life, we're going to have to get inside of his culture. We're going to have to understand that he didn't speak our language. He didn't wrestle with the same questions that we do. And if we're not careful, what we're going to do is misinterpret Jesus. So in 1519, the Spanish explorer Cortez goes into Mexico and meets the Aztec king Montezuma. And they have a cross-cultural experience. Neither of them had seen anyone like the other person. They didn't speak the same language. They really had nothing in common.
I mean, Cortez is impressed by Montezuma. As he comes there, he's like, wow, your streets aren't covered with human filth like our streets are in Spain.
He was super impressed by him. He was in awe of him.
They had gold everywhere.
The problem is that they really couldn't communicate. And so when Montezuma started praising Cortez, Cortez thought Montezuma was surrendering. But in Montezuma's culture, when you praised someone like Cortez, your opponent, what you were really doing is exalting yourself. Montezuma was saying, you're great and I'm greater. But Cortez didn't know that, and Cortez ended up, he and his army ended up wiping out the whole Aztec civilization. Incredibly sad. So what's the point? Well, they failed to communicate because they were a part of different cultures and didn't take time to learn about the other person. That could happen with us in Jesus.
Oh, yeah.
Unless we go and we learn about who he is, what he believed, the world he grew up in. And that's what we're going to try to do in this class.
So you're basically saying to follow the golden rule. which Jesus invented, by the way. Treat other people the way that you want to be treated. I don't want someone to demand that I think the way that they think about everything. We should get to know Jesus on his own terms. It's that simple. Now speaking of that, do you think that Jesus ever said anything about going to heaven?
Whoa. Don't pull that private school stuff on public school kids. Stop. That question, well, that's for the next time. Why? All right, thanks, guys. That was awesome. What do we do now? Do another one? Oh, yeah, we got to take a second look at it.
Yep.
I wiggled my fingers.
You did good.
Wonder if Kristen's going to keep this.